as we shift into a new era. Here's what was, this is what's coming. Our world is never going back to 2019, so what will the new era look like? And most importantly, what is immediate that will affect the pocketbook and the outlook into next year so we can all get ready? Thank you for joining. I'm your host, David DuByne. Right along here with Ransom Godwin tonight, taking you through the next 2 hours. Layers of time is what we would infer this program as, because I'm here in Kyoto, Japan right now, halfway across the planet, having a double espresso. Going to probably be jittery like a squirrel running around today, just too much coffee while I'm here at the keyboard. But I went to the Kyoto Museum, not to be confused with the National Museum of Kyoto. But this was a much smaller museum. And right in front there, everybody passed by it, but it was probably the most important display of the entire museum was they had layers of soil over the last 12,000 years. Ransom, which I just sent you, if you could check Skype. I sent you the photos of the sterile layer at 12,000 years ago to 10,000 years. And when you look at the size of the rocks that came in on their flood zone, there's an incredibly developed science following floods and how much debris is put into lakes and that sort of thing. When there's massive floods, the size of the debris is much larger. You get little rocks and sometimes larger rocks that'll roll in with bigger water flow. And if you just get consistent regular rainfall, you get more silt coming into lakes. So normally they do this in high alpine lakes where they'll drill down in the cores and they'll look at the different layers and they can tell you how much rainfall there was or there was not, or there were massive floods or there were not, just depending on how much debris is flown into a lake or a pond or something like this. They did a very good job of reconstructing, but there was a massive sterile layer, giant rocks. And I would say if you're looking at the strata, it's sand, silt, what you consider like pea-sized gravel, and then you get something the size of multiple baseballs. And this was the sterile layer. So we can guarantee that the reset occurred here too. When I was traveling in Italy, they called it the barren layer or the barren period. Here they call it a sterile layer, but whatever it is, this thing happened globally and can be traced back to the Younger Dryas era. And then how civilization evolved after that, generally starting around 10,000 years, and some of the statues and pottery and this thing had very much alien origin to it or alien contact to it. Large eyes, things wearing spacesuits. It was quite interesting here. But then you go to the National Museum. I was expecting in the Jomon period, this is the period anybody wants to follow out. Take a look at these artifacts from the period called Jomon, Jomon. I was expecting their National Museum here in Kyoto to be loaded with that stuff. And all they had were arrowheads and a couple like stone tool implements, which they said they didn't know what they were used for. So we're going to talk about that tonight, the resets through history. Can you map them out? We're at another one. And how do we not only get ready during these times, but thrive? So, Ransom, I sent you the photos. Hope you got them on there on Skype. And it's going to be a great program, man. What are you seeing in the realm of distraction to keep you from not noticing these, these changes in front of us?
I think they're rubbing it in, how much changes are, at this point. I mean, just a quick look through the headlines and you see some pretty crazy stuff. Just like every week we talk, before you gave me a title, I was going to name it 2024, the year of shock, because they're going to keep shocking people. Here's a good one right now, because, you're talking about the reset and, these collapses of not only environment, but any civilization that was going on. It seems like they're trying to train us for the Matrix now. Mold on the menu. Scientists create surprising meat replacement from mold. So bugs and mold, right? And that's kind of gross. But we just live in the greatest of headline times. Supposedly, like 50 sorcerers just got killed in Angola. Alleged sorcerers. They say about 50 people died in Angola after being forced to drink a herbal potion to prove that they weren't witches. Sorcerers. Does that sound familiar throughout time repeating itself there? Oh, my God. Don't drink the Kool-Aid. Don't drink the Kool-Aid, please. If people are trying to make you drink the Kool-Aid, don't do it. And, election disinformation takes the big leap as AI is being used to deceive worldwide, according to the experts. And this one's great right here. We've been talking about rewilding and the creation of new human species and all kinds of stuff. A Montana man pleads guilty to creating a giant hybrid sheep with cloned animal parts. He took some testicle cells and some other stuff, and he made a hybrid giant sheep, crossbreeding different species together. I think the one that he got, and this was for the purpose of hunting, right? But this is another one in a long line of not only programs to put animals that are not around anymore. Like, there's several of the viewers have been sending me a bunch of them on Twitter, because after, I guess, hearing us talking about that, they started seeing the headline pattern of reintroducing like wolverines and all kinds of other little animals back into niches, and you might think that that's great. They used to live here. The problem with that is that environments change over time, and then they balance out. And then when you put the animals sometimes back in there, it flips to a new extreme until it balances out again. But these sheep right here are Asian Longhorn, and they're mixing them with the native Longhorn in the U.S., trying to create a bunch of animals so they could go shoot them. Here, I think I got.
Yeah, because Ransom, you can always find cloned sheep parts in the closest 7-Eleven. It's so easy to find.
Right. It says you sent me media, but I don't have it. It didn't come for some reason.
It's there. It's Skype's really slow. I'm on a VPN, and when I moved away from Skype to actually pop into a couple windows for news stories, you know how when you move away from Skype, it doesn't send your message. So hang loose. It's like 50% sent to you. When you see the layers, it's going to blow your mind. Sometimes these things that are innocuous and they put in the front of museums or in the back. And I went to Kyoto National Museum, and they had something that was definitely a remnant of a prior era there in terms of buildings with, ether harvesting antennas and plated copper roofs and these gutters that we've seen through time with the most ornate gutters that were from a different time period. Still intact, but that's coming. It's about 50% sent. They're large images. I didn't compress them because I wanted you to see if you wanted to dive down into the granularity of the layers, but it's of utmost importance to understand these cycles repeat.
Yeah, and that's cool that you're getting to look at the Jaman culture or Ainu, really. The original.
Yeah, the Jomon is how they say it. Jomon.
All right. That's really weird because for, decades, the main population of the Japanese they kind of shunned the Ainu people and the Ainu history. And there's literature written by Japanese scholars about how they're an Asiatic lost Caucasoid tribe. And then recently when they did their DNA testing, they found out that, that's the origin of the samurai. That the people that they were shunning are actually the original kind of sprout of the culture there in Japan. And now they're accepting it and accepting the people and the history and all of that too. It's pretty cool revelations going on over there in anthropology. And not to mention that, I was wondering if you got a chance to see any of the buildings with the like hexagonal multi-sided masonry like they have in Cusco and other places around the world, like Greece, Egypt, and Japan is one of those places that has that kind of masonry that looks exactly the same as on all of the other continents. But it's right there on the Japanese island. And then you also have that giant megalithic altar type thing off the coast there. So some big things were happening in prehistory around that area. All kinds of different peoples. They're having to reset the clocks on everything. So I was doing research I was going to make a video about, the mystery of the big brain event that they talk about in human beings. And they're having to rewrite all of their literature because they had placed this, one of these events only 35,000 to 40,000 years ago. And now we're seeing that Cro-Magnons were walking around for hundreds of thousands of years now, according to gene evidence, alongside Neanderthal and Denisovan, at the same time interbreeding. And, like I recently did one of my own DNA tests, and I happen to have one of the oldest mitochondrial DNA haptype groups that comes out of Central Asia. It was pretty cool. And so the only other people in the world that share my maternal haptype, they all live in southern Russia, and it's trippy because they're all Asian-looking people today. I think they're called the Atlians, I believe, and it's right there where China, Mongolia, and Russia all meet together. And in the gene literature, they're talking about 65, 70, 80,000 years ago. And, some of these old theories about when we got smart, when we developed language, when our brains increased, when the neuron connections increased, they have no idea. They're going to have to rewrite everything. It seems like even the genetic evidence is showing that there were modern humans living hundreds of thousands of years ago on all three continents, Asia, Europe, and Africa, and possibly even had, judging by the peoples of Australia, these admixture people, that includes all three groups of the main human groups in these three continents, or actually 4 or 5 to get technical. We're moving through the islands and all over the Pacific, all the way down into Australia. Australians have the Aboriginal people, not the new arrival European people, but the Aboriginal people have a high percentage of Denisovan DNA. And I recently did mine, and I paid a little extra to get the archaic I forgot what they call it, but basically it's like the scale of how much archaic DNA you have. And according to them, I'm 0.029 Denisovan and 0.196 or 1.96 Neanderthal. And I tested positive for several Neanderthal genes that they have a lot of studies for, including dark skin and, like some other stuff. And I'm going back through my genealogy, finding out that what people think is their history, not just me, but other people. I'm reading all of this other stuff. They're finding out their histories of oral tradition of where they think they came from may not even match, the history of their DNA and where their ancestors were going all over the globe. So that's pretty interesting stuff. And we know in Japan was one of those centers of high technology in the ancient past, and maybe you might see that. I know that at the imperial house, I forgot what the exact name of it is, but the main imperial building where the emperor used to live, down at the bottom of that is for sure one of those masonry foundations that looks just like Cusco, Greece, Egypt, and other places with the multi-sided, no mortar, three-dimensional blocks that fit perfect together. I don't know how they did it, if they were melting rock or using magnetics to bend it, or, who knows what they were doing, but it is a lot of evidence of, these cycles that keep going. And speaking of that, back into, our cycle, they're bringing back stuff to not only scare, but it's seemingly to infect. And there's two possibilities here. There's real people going out spreading old diseases around. It's just a conspiracy theory. Or two, the earth periodically and cyclically goes through exact conditions right for different life forms on earth. And why wouldn't we think that they would be the same for microbes, funguses, bacterias, and viruses? The same as it is for animals, because the same thing. And there's a bunch of articles right now talking about whales in places they haven't been in hundreds of years, and animals returning to nature that haven't been rewilded, or at least publicly rewilded, but they're just popping up here and there, haven't been seen for hundreds of years. So possibly, just nothing to do with man. These cycles are going around that are bringing in us stuff like experts warning about leprosy isn't an ancient history, as is cases surge in the U.S. We have returning typhoid and dengue fever. We have measles and mumps outbreaks everywhere along the borders at certain specific spots. I don't want to get into that because we might get turned off. And in the background, in the midst of it, something I've been telling everybody forever, that you are living in the past and you haven't caught up to the future. And they're slowly breaking it to the public that the times have changed, but it'll happen so fast as far as like boots on the ground, that people are just going to be in a shock. They're not going to be able to absorb the changes because they've been incremental thus far. And then when it hits the singularity of change, it'll be to a point where no one can deny that the entire world is fundamentally changing into something that no human on Earth recognizes, except for the planners that plan. Here's an article from Axios, coming soon, a programmable army of humanoid robots. Obviously, that's going to be military and commercial for building and, other things like serving and maintenance and, et cetera. All of the jobs that people depend on, those high paying jobs out there, are disappearing slowly. And that's something that we've been talking about on this show for quite some time and is coming to fruition right now. So this is the cycle of bust, the cycle of shock, and the cycle of traumatic change.
I would agree with you. I mean, if we look back and see how many times these resets have occurred before, is it anything new? No, it's not. It's all the same. It's all a repeat. And that's why we're not taught this routinely, is because if you knew it was a repeat, then you wouldn't go out of your way to live your life as it was linear, where you're born and things move forward, and there was once riding horses and now there's rocket ships, all in a couple 100-year period. And then I'm wondering, over those 8,000 years, looking at some of these layers, which I just say, Ransom, all the picks came through for you there. But when I look at some of those things and all right, well, what do we do in 200 years or 300 years? Then where's the other 7,000, 700 years of disappeared time where they was using sticks and stones? And I really, you took that long to move from sticks and stones into wheels? Come on. It just doesn't even make sense. Not only the pre-Younger Dryas impact, that society 14,000 years ago coming out of the Ice Age, okay, that's one thing to contend with in itself. A lot of thoughts there that might be interesting to go down that route. But even post-Younger Dryas, where these soil layers are coming from after the barren period, which is talked about in Italy, or the sterile layer here in Japan, all the same. But after that happens, then did just humans stop? Did every ingenuity and creativity just stop for 7,500 years before they start doing something 3,500 years ago? And then suddenly we got these most beautiful marble statues. We come out of complete nothing, living in mud huts, apparently, the way the story goes. Hunter-gatherers, and then the very next 100 years we're putting up mega cities with mega columns of white marble and the most beautiful carved statues and things that are near impossible, and what you consider using stone masonry. And where did that jump come from? You look back and something is definitely amiss with the timelines. And, it being a cycle in itself, magnetic field lines, that explains where a lot of animals have come off or come into the wrong place. And magnetic field's definitely changing on our Earth. It's been changing for a while. That's not even new news. The new news, continuing news, is Swarm continues not to publish any data on where our magnetic fields lines are moving to, especially the southern magnetic anomaly, intensifying and also moving. But that is, I guess, for your eyes only, or somebody's eyes only. But that would explain a lot of where animals are in the wrong place, where birds, bees, butterflies migrate to the wrong places. Bees, they use the same magnetic field lines to determine their place of origin when they fly out from the hive. If that were to move because of an earthquake during the day, they might very well end up in the wrong place, even by feet, or 100 feet, 200 feet. But then whales and wolves and this sort of, like you say, badgers, or not badgers, but, these larger types of predatory animals, they move on magnetic field lines as well, homing. Now, you know, dogs, again, you know, it doesn't matter if it's a wolf, it's a coyote, if it's a dog, they all kind of hardwired the same to use magnetic fields. So you always hear those stories of how did these packs move through thousands of years of the same valleys and areas? You know, there was something there that A, there was food, B, they were taken this way and they all agreed to go this way because of something in their senses. And, you know, use heightened senses and awareness that all animal kingdom has that we barely touch into. So just your most optimal day that you've ever had in your life, everything was firing in your brain at 100%, the best you ever have performed. And then your six senses, this sort of thing, extrasensory perception was at a heightened awareness because of something, and then multiply that by 10, and that's the average day for a dog. Then you start to think about these things in the way it should be. Now, if they're sensing the changes here also, and the human seems to be sensing it now too with the scatter interference pattern all across the world, that people are, you know, it's going to be, as they say, slowly, 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 boom, and then all at once. And we're entering that phase, but which is going to be first, the awareness of people waking up first, or the all at once, and then it happens, and then they awaken? But anyway, the whole world is kind of skittery and skittish right now, jittery. Everybody can feel something just a little bit off. But if it's a cycle, would you truly live your life the same? And that's to be asked. You know, you're born. You're supposed to pay your taxes. You're supposed to get ready for retirement. You go through XYZ in your younger life, and then you prepare for a job, and you're supposed to work that job, and then you retire, and you're supposed to sit on a beach and have cocktails when you retire. That's linear. But if you knew it was cyclical and it was coming back during your lifetime, the cycle would repeat and really change a lot of things in the world. Would you continue to work and then invest in 401k and stock market and all these things that you're quote unquote supposed to do to get ready for retirement? But you knew the cycle was going to repeat in 20 years or under, but you're still 20 years old, 30 years old. Are you going to 40 years old? Are you going to continue the same way of life? I guarantee you wouldn't. And I think not telling the populace is, you know, in my opinion, sometimes, you know, I have these different days. I'll wake up on the left side of the bed and go, we shouldn't tell everybody because it'll scare them. And then I wake up on the right side on the pillow. I'm like, you know, we need to tell everybody because they need to get ready. But, you know, what kind of, you know, world change would this be? Because I want to come at it in a different direction from you. There's definitely a concerted effort to stop us from eating certain food products. Now, why is that at this juncture when everything is overlaying on top of cycle after cycle, governments changing, economies changing, and now they want you to stop eating certain foods? Now, you could go the easy route and say, well, they don't want you to have protein because if you have protein, you're stronger, and if you're stronger, you could put up more of a resistance. Okay, I could buy that for a sliver of time, but there's something far, far beyond that. And they have the stories here of these ogre giants eating people. And, you know, going back through time, just, you know, I want just that thing flipped on there. You're talking about technology. We went through the samurai collection of swords yesterday, these katanas in different periods of time of working of metal to create the most beautifully sculpted, crafted. You know, they had daggers, they had, you know, different types of, the length of it depended on if you were on foot, if you were on a horse, if you're above the enemy, or if you're below, if you're fighting your way in, fighting your way, like they took in a Rubik's Cube of conditions to create the perfect, you know, sword, or samurai sword for the best quote unquote term there, that you could just lump all of this into, because the samurai were the ones who predominantly used it. But here's the crazy thing. The ones that were in the 1600s were very good quality because they had, you know, you're talking about 400 years, because in the museum they started from, say, 1250 AD, and then they brought it up to, say, 1650 and that kind of period. So you could see about 400 years of metallurgy and sword craftsmanship and swordmanship work through that. But some of the stuff in the 1200s was far, far, far better than it was in like the late 1500s before they got to sort of really precise in the mid 1600s, which makes me, you know, kind of wonder, like, how are they producing better metallurgy, metal quality, blade sharpening skill in 1250 AD than they could in, say, 1600 or 1550? Like, you know, there was some kind of drop back there in terms of technology and workmanship, where it kind of reached an apex, say 1250, let's say 1300, because some of the stuff was in 1330, 1329. That era was like the most precise lines. And, you're talking about the thickness of a blade. So if it's not exactly to the perfect thickness, well balanced and weighted, you're going to have to sharpen one side a little bit more to get it to come to a perfect blade angle. Or there might be some little bit that you might have to sharpen more where it won't be a perfect line across the sharp edge about halfway up the blade, the width of it, not the length. But when you go back to some of the stuff, 1250, 1300, I mean, it is the most precise line. It's almost that damn like laser generated sharpening lines, And then you come up into the 1450s, 1550s, and it's all over like a drunken sailor where they're trying to sharpen that. Because it wasn't as precise on the metallurgy, so you couldn't get that cleanest of cuts. They got it really incredibly sharp. I mean, that thing will cut through paper without even thinking about it. But the way they had to sharpen it a different way and be like off center a little bit to cut, there was a step back. And, and it matches up, Ransom, with those images I sent you there and the different periods of time. Like there was a setback in time there somewhere. And that's the whole thing about it. I'm starting to find some of these, how do you say, replacement times or reset times based on just what I saw in terms of how they had the quality of the metalworking. And that was called the Muromochi period. So I'm up here on just the periods in Japanese history. So the Muromochi period, that's right there at 1336. So that Kamakura period prior to that, 1185 to 1336, they reached some apex there for, at least working metals and having that skill. So you think about the skill level of a blacksmith and, coming into combining different metals for strength and hardness, alloys, like they reached a very high point somewhere in the 1200s. That collapsed during 1336 to 1573. Like there was a setback. And then once it comes forward and you get back into the Edo period, then you start to get more military action. And once you move forward from that, it's just continuous shogun wars or, shogun battles trying to control territory. It's very interesting how prior to 1185, there weren't that many people around, so the battle for resources was not that intense. But as soon as you come into the 1600s, oh my gosh, everybody was fighting for every square inch. And an interesting thing in that Edo period, which overlaps into the Maunder minimum period at, let's say, 1640 to 1700, there were famines, there were riots. It was continuous battle lines moving back and forth to try to control food resources in food growing areas nonstop for 100 years. So again, when you start to pick out these periods of stability or instability or change or reverse in technology, it's so clean here to pick it out in Japan because they really wired down their history. And China's very much the same way too. Now, Italy, it does go back, and there's a lot of history with Rome and, the ancient Romans and the Greeks. And like I said before in the program when we were there, a guy I talked to who's super into history was telling me that when the ancient Romans went there, we're talking like North Italy and Palmanova and Verona and these places, that they stumbled across cultural layers beneath them already. So it's like nothing new on this reset. It's just, can you ping the time of it and the intensity of it? And then you ask yourself, why is the world changing today so much? So in my opinion, this is just my opinion, I think the new period has been pinged and wired in on when it begins, when the apex of it will occur, and the intensity of the change this time. I think that's already been figured out. And what we see out in the world is a result of that, of governments posturing for these same changes once they understood the intensity of it. So my question to everybody listening tonight would be, the amount of change we're seeing across the world with economy, government, society, the breakdown of supply chains, the starts of wars, etc., how intense do you think this cycle might be? Like from a 1 to 10, the amount of change we're seeing, where does that fit into the layer of how intense this might be for our world? That would be more my question, because it's written in the stones. And one last thing, Ransom, the major stones you're talking about, Osaka Castle has exactly what you're talking about in some areas of the walls. Some of the megalithic stones are like 30 to 50 tons. some of the areas have what you're talking about, sort of maybe not all exactly hexagonal, but there are areas where the stones look like they've been sort of melted together as a poured substrate. They didn't use concrete or any kind of binder in there. We consider like mortar concrete today, a better term. But then other areas of the walls are just so thick and so gigantic that you got 30-ton blocks just laying on top of each other, like it's not going to go anywhere. They've had earthquakes for thousands of years here, and these walls are still intact. Because you cannot tell me some 1,500 years ago that they're moving 50-ton blocks around by horse, uphill, across moats, into the center island, which resembles sort of a portion of a star fort. Some of this stuff is so far beyond our engineering capabilities of today. I want you to move 100 of these stone blocks, but each one weighs 50 tons, and then some of the larger blocks there were in excess of 300 tons. And that's in the walls of that Osaka Castle. So, try to explain some of this. And you talked about the underwater Yonaguni Island. Well, I found those maps in Venice of the sea level that was about 300 feet lower than today, 200 feet lower, which showed a lot more land around the Japanese island. That showed a lot more land around what you're talking about, Yonaguni. That's all those islands that are just barely sticking up or just giant masses of land out there. Taiwan was much larger than it was. The coast of China was very, very different, way further out into the channel. But sea levels would have been substantially lower, 200 feet lower. Like, who had maps of 200-foot lower sea levels, unless we're talking about a previous civilization? And that technology or that mapping capability, again, which is incredibly difficult to do, got passed down, and then we kind of rediscovered longitude, latitude. Eventually, longitude was the one of the hindrances to shipping going back, let's say 1200 AD, 1300 AD. They couldn't figure out the longitude. And that's why and then you look at that and you go, wait, how did they get these maps with Antarctica down there? How did they get these maps that had sea levels much lower? There's a lot of pieces that just, something is repeating in a cycle here that wiped back the previous civilization to a point, not all the way. But that Younger Dryas period just smacked everybody across the head and really reduced the world's population. And what you said, Ransom, is it out of, or was it those are the remnants of? And they just repopulated after the cataclysm at the Younger Dryas period. So I'm done talking, but I hope you see those images that I sent through in that sterile layer at the very bottom there. That is the Younger Dryas impact layer that affected Japan, even though it was a continent over in North America.
Yeah, looking at that, you could tell. Look at all the rubble in that layer. I mean, and then when you look at the other layers above it, you see something that's totally different. You got that fine sand and all of that other stuff. I sent you a picture of the Imperial Palace in Tokyo, and that is, I mean, I don't know how anyone can say that is not the same masonry work as Cusco. And I'm going to put that up on the screen here for everyone. That's the same stuff, and you find that worldwide. And this is.
I have another one here. Let me send you the name of it. I think it's called the Nishi Castle here. There's one exactly like that, but it's a smaller version of the same thing.
Right.
It's here in Kyoto. Yeah. It's called, Nijo, Nijo Castle. Take a look at that one. Everybody out there listening. And Ransom, if you want to try to match it, Nijo Castle. Apparently it was built in 1603. But if you look at the corners, it replicates that, not to the same size, obviously, but the exact same stone masonry and the same stonework and the same connection on the corners that I saw. And Paul Manova has the exact same thing, just like that in Italy as well.
Yeah, I see that there. I'm looking at it. You can tell that some of it's the same thing as everywhere else you go. Like if you go down in South America, you find this, super impressive, megalithic, big block, no writing, massive creations. And then you have cultures that just show up and, well, I mean, why wouldn't you use it if it's there? I mean, it's pretty obvious that you would use that if you came along. And I think we're at that cycle right now where they're about to cover us up. And, I keep harping on this, but we're now in that era where they don't need mothers and fathers. They don't need animals to procreate animals. They can create a food substance, like the Soylent Green or any other thing. I mean, just imagine all of the little ideas that they put out there in the past movies. And now we're looking at headlines that people might not bat an eye to. But think about it, if you were 50 years ago reading this headline about mold on the menu, how AI is controlling people's minds. We're killing witches in the same era in different places, and people that aren't even billionaires are crossbreeding different species and cloning them, making giant hybrids, which shows you that all of these stories about chimeras and different things in the past are not that far fetched, right? Here's an article right here from the Wall Street Journal. Doctors can now edit the genes inside your body. That's where we're at. And then they're spreading these fears, or actually spreading somehow diseases, leprosy, dengue fever, typhoid, all of these things that are pretty much in the past, measles, mumps, chickenpox, right at the same time as, they're telling you that we can just program an army of humanoid robots. And then at the same time, we're going to build us some pleasure towers and mega cities for the elites, but you're not going to live in there. But they do want you to live around it so you could stare at it all day and worship them. So here's one out from the Sun. Pleasure Tower, stunning plans for a $12 billion skyscraper casino that would change the iconic New York skyline forever, but only after they get a law changed. I bet they'll do that. And then here's a good one of the sign of the times of cycles. Titanic replica plans to resurrect, and it could set sail by 2027. And then here, let's talk about this.
Ransom, please hold for
Dallas
a second. Getting a couple messages that we're not feeding on Rumble. That's not a live feed gone, and the Twitter's not up and live at all either. So they're coming through on Twitch, okay, and here in Revolution Radio. Thank you for letting us speak tonight freely. But everywhere else is off the feed, so I didn't know if you saw that or not.
Let me check it out. And I'll be right back.
Rumble. Yes, Revolution Radio, thank you for letting us speak tonight. And if anybody else does appreciate free speech and for us to be on air talking, then consider a donation right here to revolution.radio. Many ways to donate. Those of you following the crypto space these days, you want to mail a check, awesome. PayPal pulled their accounts, unfortunately, but please look at the different ways to donate and keep our live stream on air here. So they do run the production costs and the, holding the website down here, and also combining and working with different streaming platforms, which also has a cost associated with it to get the message out to as many places as they can go to. But aside from that, I wonder why our feed got cut. That was interesting. So, when we're talking and then something like this happens and you go down on multiple feeds at the same time, you got to wonder, was it tech related or was it purposeful? Because you look at all these different laws coming in now of what you can say or not say, what's safe to talk about, what's not safe to talk about. Because I'm always making the joke that when I was growing up, the safest thing you could ever talk about at a party was the weather. The rule was no politics, no religion at a party, don't talk about it. But now, the most dangerous thing to talk about at a party is the weather, the climate. It's unbelievable how they've inverted everything, where the safest topic is now the most dangerous to talk about. You kind of have to go with these landmines as you move through the cultural norms or the purposeful wall in front of conversation. And, if I might say something about the TikTok thing here, they're saying, it's a national security risk and you got to take down TikTok or whatever. Okay, well, Chinese bought how much of our farmland and continue to control how much of the meat producing capability out of the United States. Nobody's blinking an eye about that. Spy balloon goes over entire United States. Finally, they, take it out after it's crossed the United States. That didn't even care about taking down the spy balloon. Multiples now, not just one. And you look at that and you say, who's controlling the meat industry? 25% so 50% of beef processing is controlled by countries outside the U.S., but 50% of that, which is 25% of the total, is controlled by China. So if you want to talk about a risk to national security, 25% of the meat supply being controlled by a foreign adversary or a foreign nation, however you like to label that, that's something to look at versus TikTok. Well, the reason the TikTok thing is, I didn't know about their metrics, and their algorithms thing. There's so much talk on there that cannot be controlled, and people in that younger demographic, teens to early 20s or even preteen and early 20s are very, very savvy these days in terms of what they're understanding, how the world is bent, and they don't understand it either. So the only people that are caught up in this mix and mess of our world that really have drunk the Kool-Aid are those between, say, 25 and 45 or 25 and 40. In there, that kind of 20-year period of Kool-Aid drinkers has been so ingrained, and then they're sort of getting into positions of power a little slight. Okay, you're a teacher, you're a head teacher. Okay, maybe you're your first, second, third year university professor after you graduated. Okay, the Kool-Aid drinkers are now in these positions to try to push their thoughts down into the rest of the society. Well, the kids don't understand it these days. The younger generation doesn't get it either. They're going, this is madness. But this is where the discussion is on TikTok. Freely, there's no censorship over there except for like climate. Unfortunately, that's one of the things they're very heavily censoring on is climate debate stuff. But in terms of politics, there's no censorship over there. So it can just like fly freely. Whatever they say. And then, the more their algorithm, the more something gets popular, the more it's pushed, obviously the way it should be. Discussion should be, in our society, the more popular it is, the more it should be discussed, because obviously it's something that has relevance, or else it wouldn't get to that snowball effect where that many people are talking about it, and it's that important of an issue. But on TikTok, it is not firewalled off for the political discussions. So whatever's over there, 90% anti-Biden. Okay, well, for them, obviously that's a problem because they're coming into an election year. You can't have everybody bad-mouthing the president, can you? So when you look at this TikTok thing, you look at it with you look at it through different colored glasses here. We got the same country buying 25% of meat production in America, controlling umpteen million acres of farmland, and then somehow the streaming platform is the problem. We got, a huge amount of things where the interconnection of China into Washington, and we can't talk about that, obviously, but you can see where that all, dovetails as well. So look at this TikTok thing in a different way. And I'm trying to make sense of it too, because the food supply keeps coming back to the food supply again. And that's the reason I was talking about it. So when Ransom's, okay, it says it's live. Let's take a look here. So thank you, Ransom, for figuring out our technical glitch there. Let me go on to the live here and see what we got. It still doesn't show my end live. It just says 7 days ago was our last post, but it might post up later. And Jero, thanks for telling us about that. Appreciate it. Jero helping us here from the Philippines tonight. Also keeping an eye on things, running the Twitch feed, making sure we're all sussed away. But I'll read the headline to you. American cattle rancher, risk of being run out of business, and then he comes up with his own op-ed piece. Your meat is being imported. 4 largest mega corporations now own 85% of the entire industry. 2 of them foreign-owned. 1 of them's Chinese. Okay, so he's being run out of business as a cattle rancher, and then he just starts writing. Maybe he's using ChatGPT. Don't know. There's a lot of smart farmers. If you get into a grid down situation, you're going to want a farmer with you because they can fix a lot of stuff, and they're always DIYing everything. So if you think that, we don't want any farmer, you can help us grow food, that's way beyond the skill set of owning a farm. Everything breaks all the time, continuously. You barely ever have anything running at 100%. It's always breaking all the time. You're always fixing, always DIYing, always solving problems. That's one thing that comes with farming. So he writes his op-ed and says, we used to make a fair amount on our cattle on the return, but the industry's changed so dramatically with the government allowing consolidation of the meat processing business. And then you talked about it last week, Ransom, when you said, I think it was New York Attorney General was suing Tyson Foods or one of the meat packers up there for something to do with climate change. And I don't have the article here with me, but this guy's talking about the ramifications of our health if the meat supply is tainted somehow, and that's making it through because what he's also saying, okay, it's not just about the meat supply itself tainted, but you didn't know this, that when China's buying, and this is for the hog industry too, China buys something called half carcasses, where they'll raise the pigs, and they have a controlling share also in the pork industry. They'll send half hogs back to China, frozen in a container, process the meat because it's cheaper to cut it back there with the labor and butcher that out, and then they'll re-import it back into the U.S. and sell it again. This is the same thing I experienced living in Hawaii with the pineapples. Like, I didn't know, I was at Matson Container Shipping, had a deal with the pineapple producers to take, this is the craziest thing, you're going to blow your mind here. In Hawaii, where they produce the pineapples have to be shipped back to Hawaii to be USDA inspected and then reshipped back to Hawaii for sale. So when you buy a pineapple in Hawaii, it's done a round trip to California and back to Hawaii again. That's insane. But a lot of the pineapple production it's a one-way trip. You know, it's harvested, sent to the mainland for processing. But a pineapple sold in Hawaii has made the round trip. And you start to look at that and go, wait, well, the meat's making that same round trip again across the Pacific twice. And that's what this farmer's talking about here. You know, you're allowing two giant companies to control a lion's share of our meat industry. Now, what happens if, for heaven forbid is the best term I could use, that conflict begins? Then what? Do you think that meat would be safe after the first couple of weeks, or do you think it would be tainted on purpose to try to knock down your foe a little bit? Scare. You know, that was the whole thing about the Japanese balloons that were sent over here and it kind of landed in the West Coast in World War II. They never put that on the news because they didn't want to scare people that the Japanese could actually get to America with balloons, and then they had some kind of device on there, I guess, that would ignite or something. And only a few dozen ever made it over here. But you never heard about that until after the war was over. But they didn't want to scare people during that time that they could reach over here. It was like out of reach. America was out of reach, you know. So we got 85% of the just even in fact of this, 85% of the meat industry in America is controlled by just 4 companies. 2 of them are foreign owned. Just even that number alone of 85% of everything controlled by 4 companies. That should send signals too that, wait, we need to do some, we need to start breaking that up again. Remember the AT&T monopoly back in the day when then AT&T broke up and they were forced to break up? Government forced AT&T to break up because they controlled so much of the industry. Well, I think that needs to happen again for quite a few industries that we exist or look at in. You know, meatpacking perhaps being one where they can't consolidate the entire food supply under a few companies. I mean, look at Procter & Gamble and all these things, and they're great, and they make a lot of product, but they're monopolies also. Everything's a monopoly today. We've allowed monopolization of every single industry, and then it's intertwined with government as well. So government's dictating to these, monopolistic industries what to put in, what not to deliver, how much to deliver. And then, now who's going to watch the watchers? That's the question, where the watchers need to be watched so then we can break up these monopolies of food production and then, get our food production back into local hands again. That way we have a safe food supply. Not TikTok, food supply. So anyway, Ransom, I digress.
No, I think they're doing a lot of, it's a big mental bash to scare people. I mean, like really scare them in the wrong ways. So here's like the most overweight cities in the U.S. So keep in mind that these people are not in the best of health because of things that are going on. Like I forgot where it was here, 85-mile track in Louisiana. It's just totally toxified. 85-mile stretch in Louisiana known as Cancer Alley sees rates of disease and birth defects up to 7 times the national average in its 1.5 million population. That's from the Daily Mail. Now, think about this for a second. We have upwards of, I'm going to say in my own opinion, because I've been paying attention since the early 2000s, the amount of waves that are admitted of people that entered the United States, and, you know, they're admitting upwards of 20 million now, openly on the news. So I've been paying attention the whole time. I'm going to say it's more like 40 million people, which would put us about 400 million people in the U.S. right now. Where are they all going, though, you might ask yourself? Well, they're going to these places right here on this list of most overweight cities in the U.S. And keep in mind, they weren't going to be able to control what these people ate until now, until they volunteered to join the biometric track and trace system of the world. And we just got 40 million people over here in the Americas to move and voluntarily get biometrically identified. And they tell you on the news, oh, well, we don't know who's coming in. And, you know, it's a secret. And there's all these people coming in. We don't know who it is. We got to close the border. Everything on these arguments are a lie on both sides. Yes, there are millions of people coming. No, they are not getting their biometrics. They are finding out who all of these people are. They just don't share that information. And they're shipping them to cities. The cities are becoming the central idea of all of this dystopic nightmare reset idea, where you shove all the people into the cities. And then what happens in the cities is crime goes crazy. People become obese and unhealthy at the same time as they're starving to death. Via nutrition. So look, here's the we'll go down the top 10 right here and leave it at that. McAllen, Texas; Jackson, Mississippi; Shreveport, Louisiana; Mobile, Alabama; Little Rock, Arkansas; Knoxville, Tennessee; Memphis, Tennessee; Lafayette, Louisiana; Baton Rouge, Louisiana; Chattanooga, Tennessee; Birmingham, Alabama, and the list goes on. And what you'll notice is these are the metropolitan areas for each of the states. That's where the most obese people are living. That's where the lack of fresh foods is at. That's where they're shoving the new millions of people into. Just here's an article here from Dallas and Fort Worth, which are both on that list, leads the metro area in population growth, adding 152,000 just in the last year. And then you look at stuff like this, where people in the U.S. Feel like they're protected, or they're in a bubble, or they just don't get it, that if things fall apart, it's only a week or 2 weeks before we're living the Haitian lifestyle on the Haitian diet. 4 criminals who may rule Haiti: wannabe rapper, 2 ex-cops, and a voodoo believer named Barbecue. And, you know, there's been reports of cannibalistic behavior going around the island. I don't know if that's true or not, but it's not really that unlikely. We've seen it happen in Africa and other places when it's not that there wasn't any food. It's just that the people that were in power were controlling the food. They call them warlords in Africa. We call them, the jefe, or, you know, the cartel boss over here on this side. And then we got this from Natural News: the globalists plan to eliminate all farms, no more food, no more humans. And that's what we've been talking about all the time. But don't worry, they're looking out for you peasants out there. They want a small population of genetically diverse survivors. And what are those people going to eat? Well, they'll be happy to eat the mold meat that they get at the emergency places if they want to join the biometrics program. And if they don't worry about it. There's python farming. This could offer one of the most sustainable sources of meat in the world, according to a new study, which makes you wonder, why aren't they eating that in some of the places where these animals are native? Well, the reason is because there's laws in place and military forces that will stop them from doing that in certain areas to protect the environment. And it always comes down to that, right? Humans bad, environment good. We have to fix the environment that means we have to get rid of the humans. And I think this really goes back to what happened in Texas with this wildfire thing that killed all these millions of head of cattle. And that was just the first estimates of the ones that died. That was not counting the millions that probably died in the last week that had burned hooves, burned faces, udders, and other things that were dying horrible, deaths already slowly. So they're going to have to put those animals out, which obviously is one domino in the dominoes of the food prices. We're also seeing petroleum is about to skyrocket. The plug is being pulled right now, but they're giving you these options. Eat the bugs, eat cereal for dinner. You know what? Don't worry about it. You can eat snake. And it makes you wonder why they're pushing the grossest, lowest swamp drudging, low, creepy, crawly type food, including mold and bacteria, because, a lot of people go get these health drinks and different stuff, and it says on the side, oh, there's citric acid in there. That's great. I'm getting my vitamin C. But they don't realize they're feeding a bunch of mold, and it poops, and that's what you're eating, is citric acid. But anyway, we'll get back to the food emergency that's going on.
Yeah, and if any of those people from Haiti...
This is Mysteries in the Histories. A mysterious manuscript, roughly 250-page book written in an entirely unknown language and writing system. It's been carbon dated back to the 1400s and includes illustrations of plants that don't resemble any known species, believed to have been intended as a medical text. It's named for the Polish book dealer who purchased it in 1912. This is the mystery of the Voynich manuscript. Since its discovery in 1912, the 15th century Voynich manuscript has been a strange, mysterious cult phenomenon captivating the minds of many. Its first confirmed owner was Georg Barisch, from 1585 to 1662, an alchemist from Prague, who discovered it in his library. Barisch tried to investigate the manuscript's origins to no avail. The manuscript, full of handwriting in an unknown language, zodiac symbols, naked women and strange objects like unknown plants, seemed to be from another time, or even another world. For centuries, this book repeatedly changed hands. When it was purchased by Voynich, who posited that it was authored by Albertus Magnus, an alchemist, or Roger Bacon, an early scientist. People believed that Voynich himself fabricated the manuscript, although that theory wouldn't explain the carbon dating of the paper and ink to the 15th century. The book itself bears no indication of its authors, about 6 inches by 9 inches and around 232 pages decorated, not unlike others in the illuminated age. Wrapped in vellum, with vellum pages, the manuscript features 116 folded folios bound in 18 bundles. The binding of the book is old and busted, though it is not original to the text. Many of the pages are fold-outs, some are missing. Inside the tome are innumerable lines of looping text, inked in iron gall in a medium typical of the Middle Ages, scribbled in a strange, unfamiliar language and a strange, unfamiliar script, incomprehensible, causing Voynich to conclude that the tome was written in code. Alongside the text, unknown if important or decorative, there is an abundance of illustrations and pictorial art. Composed of inks and pigments in tones and color palettes common to the 1400s, these illustrations seem to split the manuscript into 4 separate sections, including sections about botany, astronomy and astrology, balneology, the science of the therapeutic use of baths, and pharmacology, as well as a 5th and final section, with blocks of text separated by stars. The first and largest section of the manuscript is the botany section that contains detailed drawings of plants as if from another world or a lost continent, plants no one can identify and no one has ever seen before. The astronomy and astrology section has illustrations of the stars, the sun and the moon alongside several zodiac signs. Immersed in strange, shared baths, female figures frolic through the pages of the text's balneological section, while the pharmaceutical section is filled with what appears to be medicinal plants, indicated by the inclusion of medicinal bottles throughout this fantastical illustration. Like Voynich, many modern scholars suspect that the manuscript's text is a ciphered form of a familiar language, with their theories of the tome's latent linguistics flitting from Latin to Nahuatl, the language of the Aztecs and Toltecs of Mexico. Others say that the text is an artificial language or strange shorthand, and others still see the text as meaningless scribbles. The theories of the tome are, thus, all over the place, with no one opinion snagging widespread support. The Voynich manuscript continues to mystify medievalists and confuse cryptologists centuries after its supposed creation. It remains as impenetrable and inexplicable as ever. But is this truly one of the mysteries in the histories? To find out, sign up for our show notes. Sign up to our show notes email list and get access to longer episodes of Mysteries in the Histories just for signing up. Signing up for the show notes, you get behind-the-scenes thoughts and points we sometimes can't relay over social media platforms. Brought to you by ITM Trading. ITM Trading has spent the last 28-plus years developing a team of expert researchers and gold and silver analysts to make this possible. Simply put, we build strategies which are historically proven to protect your wealth and assets through any economic downturn. 866-834-1422. That's 866-834-1422.
Is your now to the future? How close is the future to the now of the globalist leaders trying to set a future? It is definitely not set in stone. Revolution Radio, again, thank you for letting us speak about these subjects here freely and without censorship. So again, if everybody feels that this is an important venue to keep online so we can continue to have conversations just like this, think of a donation here at Revolution Radio to keep the production costs, station on air. These things cost money, and the bigger the station gets, the more it costs to keep it on air. It's a snowball, something like that. Again, if you have a website and you're running a bunch of traffic, it's going to cost you more once you run more traffic. So you get into that loop of you're making more, but it costs more. So it's the same thing. More information output costs more to produce the information and have the platform and the tech put together to push more information out. So consider revolution.radio. Check it out right there. Donation tab at the top. Now, before we went on the break, this whole Haiti thing is going to get crazy. The U.S. sent a bunch of ships down there, maybe mass evacuation. But remember, there's going to be a bunch of nefarious intermingled with with those that are, in genuine need to get out. But you're going to have to call them undocumented carnivores when they arrive. So please remember that. Put that at the tops of your new woke lexicon list. Illegal cannibals, that ain't going to fly. That's going to get you in the naughty school list. So, I wanted to continue with that article just before we were talking on the break. I'm going to read this for you. We're talking about TikTok again here. Oh, it's such a bad thing. But they're really concerned about the non-able to control the flow of information. And it's just so interesting that now they're talking about banning of TikTok, but then we have American politicians that are like, yeah, I'll buy that. Mnuchin was wanting to buy that. He's like, hey, once it gets divested, I'll buy it. A group of us will buy it together. American politicians forcing TikTok to divest, but then the American politicians want to come in and then buy that. I would call that a conflict of interest to begin with, just saying. But then here they're so worried about China. I'll read it word for word here. Your government won't even shoot down a communist Chinese spy balloon or prevent communist Chinese government from gobbling up your farmland or stop the Chinese government from stealing the products you make, stealing the IP, reproducing them, and then dumping them back into your own market at below market prices and then driving you out of business. And there's another part here which we can't really talk about where millions were funneled into families in the United States, but nobody blinked an eye, not even batting a single eye about that. But whoa, when there's free flow of information that can't be controlled and the mind can be bent because people speak freely, we got to stop that. Anywhere, there are no current controls anywhere else being spoken of except to control the flow of information, which should raise a bunch of flags to everybody out there. If that's the only thing they're concerned about is stopping the flow of information freely on a platform outside the United States, that people can talk about the United States inside, well, then that's a huge problem. Because then it's just smoke and mirrors. They're not really worried about TikTok. They're worried about you getting free information, the true information, and the public court of opinion will decide whether it's true or not. That's the whole thing. You shouldn't have to be fact-checked. Because if it is true information, then it will stand the test of time or be, called out by others for being erroneous, meaning fake. But that's not the way our world works these days. It's just the control of the things. Again, we're coming into this strange time. There's going to be a lot more control out there as we move forward. So you're going to see things happen, and your favorite sites might go down because you saw in the new law here the way they wrote it, apparently. Just to start us off, they put a foreign adversary clause within this TikTok bill, and a foreign adversary is now defined as a website that is, or app, that is operated directly, indirectly, or indirectly by a foreign adversary, or which is determined as a threat to the national security in the U.S. By who? Oh, wait, the president and the attorney general are the two heads that get to decide whether a website or an app is a foreign adversary or can threaten national security. Well, you could say the same thing about the climate debate. We could talk about the climate. Oh, no, you said the ice is not going to melt. Okay, that's a foreign threat because we determined and we already made. So this is so broad that they can close down pretty much any website host platform. And this is where it gets scary. And then they've written in a couple clauses for themselves and exclusives. Now, here's the exclusion. This should make your blood boil here. They want to pass all these massive laws, but the lawmakers writing this left exclusions in for themselves and then their own companies so they wouldn't be affected by this new law. I kid you not here. It's part B, the exclusion. The term covered company does not include an entity that operates a website, desktop app, mobile app, augmented or immersive technology whose primary purpose is to post product reviews, business reviews, travel information, and travel reviews. So everything else outside the arena of just those four categories can now be turned on and off at a whim of somebody behind a desk with a woke agenda saying, we don't like this website, we don't like this company, we don't like this country, we don't like this country's websites coming out to let our citizens see free information. So, we got to turn it off as deemed a national security threat. That you might actually find real information about the state of our union is considered now, what? Misinformation. So again, I'll read you those four. So if you're inside this arena of bubble of protected website classes, I can't even believe we're talking about a protected website class. Oh my gosh. Anyway, it would be a technology protected class, I guess. The primary purpose of this, again, is to protect it. Allow posts of product reviews, posting business reviews, posting travel information, and travel review information. And then you got to look at those who are involved with crafting this law and see how they are involved with this type of information flow in the websites. Anyway, Ransom, that's my intro for hour 2. Thank you for everybody joining us again. We're just going to rumble through here. Join us on Rumble. We're over there live streaming along with Twitter, and we're over on the Mini Ice Age Conversations YouTube channel as well. Welcome back.
It looks like we should be on TikTok, right? Because they're trying to ban that. And you're right. You're absolutely right about that. It has nothing to do with it being owned by the Chinese. Matter of fact, it's like two guys own 20% of it, the startup guys that are from China. The rest of it's a various group of international investors and stuff like that. So this has nothing to do with that. And knowing that our administration right now is buddy, really, with China, the Communist Chinese Party, that is, not not its people. Just like here, he's not really friends with us either, but with certain interests they are friends with. And I want to throw this weird idea at you. You would go back to Haiti for a minute. So, and this has a lot to do with the TikTok so-called ban. It has nothing to do with foreign interests or any other danger to the youth or any of these other excuses. The bill is written to stop and stop people from being able to educate themselves through social media and other platforms, period. The election interference that you keep seeing that they're talking about on all of these articles is you being an informed electorate. And that's what they're afraid of, interfering. They don't want actual facts, knowledge, common sense, an ability to look at the view of what's going on in a certain area via different platforms and decide for yourself. That's what they are really talking about when they're talking about interference. They're not worried about some foreign nation. The CIA has been setting up elections and making elections fail for years. They've bragged about it. People have written books about it. It's a big game that they've been doing for a long time. The United States is guilty of it numerous times, rigging and messing with elections, including assassinations, all kinds of stuff. So the joke that they're worried about, TikTok influencing elections or any other platform for that fact is a joke. The whole thing is about censorship of each and every individual human being so that they can't see and make educated, informed decisions about topics for themselves. Even if they're wrong, they're not able or allowed to get a message out. And then I want to throw you some, mind game right here. Let's say Guantanamo Bay, Air Force psychiatrists, ISIS, and Haitian migrants. What do they all have in common? Well, what we're about to find out, because the Biden administration is discussing using Guantanamo Bay to process possible influx of Haitian migrants. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, you should look into the years between 2003 and maybe 2011 and search the keywords Air Force, psychiatrist, ISIS, and Guantanamo Bay. Do your own research, and I'll leave that at that. But, on the other side, we're also sending troops to Haiti, like you said, where there's cannibalistic gangs allegedly running around. But do you think that might have something
my friend,
to do?
They're carnivores. They're carnivores, my friend. Do not mix a lexicon. They are carnivores.
Okay, well, carnivores are out there. And, they're trying to tell people that being a carnivore is bad, but if you eat the right kind of meats, it's okay. And we've been seeing bizarre pre-programming of that. And not to mention, we all know what happens 14 days after the power goes out and no more distribution is happening. So I don't care where you live in the world, 14 days after the lights go out and the distribution stops, all bets are off, and we already know what human beings will do in that scenario. They lose their mind, they get hungry, they get desperate, and they lose all moral compass and go into survival mode. And it's hard to even blame, a starving human being at a certain point for doing what they got to do. And I think that's why they're bringing up all these other weird alternative sources of food, so that not everybody goes crazy. There's always cloned ram. They want to be the saviors after some kind of event. I don't know what it is. Maybe a rock's going to hit the earth. We don't know. It doesn't really matter what it is. It could be something as simple as a massive infertility event in the Western world, and then obviously the newcomers to the Western world would be soaked and doused and all of those same things that contribute to stuff like this 85-mile stretch of, guess where, the biggest and most used port, obviously, in the U.S. And then, we keep having these industrial accidents. I mean, everything, whether it's random or planned, is setting up just perfect for a perfect worldwide scenario in which millions upon millions of people just disappear from the face of the earth. And I might ask you, maybe that program has already been started and you've been seeing different ways in which it's manifested itself. But one of the major ways is going to be war. And they don't want us to know what's going on. And I will point to the Middle East and the conflict that's going on there and the one in Eurasia to tell you that you don't get to see what's going on. You notice we get these little TikTok videos, no pun intended, of the heroes doing this or that on whichever side people pick. They're on both sides. And you can go look at it. It's just pure, obvious propaganda to divide and manipulate people's minds. But there's a catch. They want to be the only purveyors of it. When I say they, I mean the world governance. That includes the combine of media, government, NGOs, and these world government bodies that are set up right now to completely control what you think during this worldwide collapse. And I think it's that. I don't even think it's pessimistic. I'm just looking at a plan unfold, and they seem to be doing all the right stuff. So you go back to the, chemical plants and all of these things that are having issues. All of these industries are getting to get out of liability because they've changed names or been bought out, or, there's been mergers or split ups of their company, or they went bankrupt. There's all of these different things, and they're moving around the monies through the stocks, where you'll never know who to blame. And when something happens, like a big train derailment or something like that, the evidence seems to always just go poof, up in smoke, so to speak, just like on 9/11. So we've had a whole multi-spectrum attack on various fronts, not only from the mass migration of new citizens to change the demographics of the Electoral College, which is based on populous density in, let's face it, Democrat-held city areas. But the Texas governors and all of the people that play the other side of the WWE entertainment know what they're doing. They're busing these people, so they're helping facilitate this plan. So you see the uniparty in action right in front of you, while the mass amount of population are divided with just mind control, simple mind control, tribalism, just like NFL or fake wrestling or soccer, if that's your sport. We know that there are people that control all of those industries, because that's the bread and circus to the masses. That's always been the way to control the population, or at the very least, keep it distracted while bad times show up. And, bread and circus is what they're going to give us. But now it's mold meat and, who shot Nellie in the belly, right, from Hollywood, telling us what we should do, what we should wear, who we shouldn't like. And I know that there are millions of awake people out there that don't follow that, and matter of fact are insulted when they see it being broadcast to them. And so they pick a different channel, and they try to go down that same route of division and tribalism psychology, expecting a different result. But then you find out that everybody that is able to broadcast just about has been bought. They've been bought. They've been given rules. They've been given restrictions and gags. And the only thing left are things like Revolution Radio and the way that we squeeze out information, through the airwaves on the various social media networks, trying not to get banned, trying to walk on eggshells, trying not to hit the algorithm. And by the way, we've talked about when is the point when you have to worry about the AI. And I've been saying that I think the singularity has already happened. But according to Bloomberg, this gold medalist coders build an AI that can do their job for them. What does the AI do? Well, it can create websites, video games, and apps. Now, when you combine this technology with the new powers that governments around the world are trying to give themselves, you will realize that we now live in that proverbial matrix of a completely AI-run fake society, or, not a simulation, but a dissimulation of fake wool over the eyes of everybody. And everything that you look at from history to anthropology is being manipulated to pull the heartstrings and divide, conquer based on trivial differences amongst the hybrid species we call Homo sapien. And they're doing a good job at it. So now you can look forward to AI that creates AI. We knew it was coming. We were wondering when, and now there's some kids bragging about it. It looks cute, good for them, sounds like a great idea. But we know that they're on the rung. They're not at the top of the field of cybernetics, robotics, or AI. Those fields are in black budget projects that are not available to the general public. And how they incrementalize and brainwash is to release or allow someone to come up with a new invention that does something that they already do, and that way they can start implementing all of these things right in front of your face without you questioning it, because you feel like an educated sheeple, and you read that on an article, so oh yeah, I knew that. Yeah, but do you realize that they've probably doing it for decades, and that everything's played out, including these wars, famines, and seemingly, the pestilence and disease that goes around too. If I don't, get too bold, I think all of these things are being quantum computed at a quantum level. They're being computed now on how to roll out the new reset of humankind. And I think that singularity that everybody's waiting for off in the future is happening now, while they show us Hollywood entertainment and stuff that's basically showing you what they could do 20 years ago in a futuristic, brightened way, so that it looks dazzling. And it's kind of like the joke about what they used to say, that no one would ever fight for their freedom as long as there was like 101 Baskin Robbins ice cream flavors and 200 cable channels to lose yourself and immerse yourself in passive entertainment, which is what the percentage of everyone is watching. Even if they're watching the news and they feel like, they don't watch the drama TV, they are watching the news, and they are watching the news shows, and they are reading the articles, a lot of which is being written by that same AI conglomerate of, the top stockbrokers and stuff that we don't know about, the companies that are trading money back and forth, that goes into the deep state and the black budget projects that have the same and better technology. And what I can see that they're doing now is they're giving all of these options of a change of lifestyle for human beings. Do you want to eat the snakes and the mold meat, or, do you want to eat people? It's just green rafers. We're all carnivores. We need to eat meat. So what happens when the food actually stops being produced? They're conditioning everybody right now to deal with those scenarios. And I actually think the whole zombie phenomenon of the past 20 years in entertainment is a lot to do with this predictive programming about this upcoming event that we're about to deal with. And I think it's like real close, because you just look around the world, things are falling apart. It's a bubble that's bursting, and it's a planned popping of that bubble because they want to transition power into new areas. And one of those is to be not just your government daddy, but the actual biological daddy of who gets to live and who doesn't. And they want to be worshipped as gods. And I think they're getting to the point where if they reset good enough, no one will remember any of this stuff that was pre-reset, just like we don't know what was pre-Diluvian.
Yeah, it's going to make you want to run to the Bitcoin citadels there. And you can see also, just dovetailing right into that, you can see how the economy is being transferred and changed in the same vein, along with taking you into that AI dependence. I mean, not that we're not dependent on credit cards and ATMs and online banking enough already, where if that stops, which we've seen a few times where there's internet outages, people, freak out about they can't get to their social media. But at the same time, they freak out because they can't access their online banks and like, wait, I missed the transfer. Wait, I didn't get payroll. Hey, wait, I missed this. Missed my house payment because the thing was down. That's all your own fault. Like, no, banks don't care. Even out in Lahaina and Maui, the mortgage companies are still making those people pay for their mortgage, even though they don't have homes and the insurance companies haven't paid out yet. They're still required to continue their monthly payments in order to own the land. Because when the insurance companies pay out, if they don't own their land and it was repossessed by the bank, the insurance companies won't have to pay out to those owners because they don't own the homes anymore, and the claim won't be with the bank won't claim on itself now, will it? This is the kind of thing you need to think about. And the reason I would say that is this dependence on AI and the run-up in the Bitcoin halving and this mania that is going on currently with anything cryptocurrency is beyond anything we've seen before. This is where mom and pop start getting on the FOMO, like fear of missing out. So I want to bring you two stories that go right along with this. I'm going to be talking with Mike Adams tomorrow about this here. The Bitcoin frenzy and the fray. Now, there's multiple things happening that even just the newswire coming across as of March 14th yesterday. In previous, about 2 weeks ago, I was trying to lay out the case that this time there is so much money going into the exchange traded funds or ETFs on Wall Street, where you don't buy the physical product, you buy access to the physical product through a product on Wall Street that's officially controlled, and everything that makes it legal and everything that makes it compliant and everything that makes it a financial product that you could sell to mom and dad as an investment, retirement, 401k product. So everything's wrapped up nicely in regulation. That didn't exist in cryptocurrency until earlier this year. But now it exists. So now we have the Ethereum exchange traded funds that are starting on Wall Street, in addition to the Bitcoin funds that are starting on Wall Street. And word on the street is Chainlink will be the next one that is going to have its own exchange traded fund. And you could see it as with every other thing that has been derivatized, that every cryptocurrency and probably the top 20 will have their own exchange traded funds on Wall Street. But I digress. I want to just move back to the Bitcoin for a second, because Bitcoin's very limited. There's only 21 million that are possible for anybody to have or hold. So the first thing moving through, trillions of dollars are moving into these exchange traded funds over the next quarter. So if anybody's not really familiar with quarters, like quarter one is where we are right now, January, February, March, these 3 months, that's one quarter, quarter one. Quarter two is next, April, May, June. And this is where they anticipate trillions of dollars flowing into the exchange traded funds, which is the reason that I did the videos before, because the absurd amounts of return on this are going to draw money out of the regular banking system to the point that we're in this conundrum right now. Inflation's running so high and people are just out there looking for any way, shape, or form that they can make extra money. And passive money, where you put your money in and make it work and get a higher interest rate than the next place, is the way a lot of people do it. Even if you're leaving it in for a day, you're making some money versus no money. Now, prior, when you left your money in a bank account, you got a 1/4 of 1%. Not even a percent, not even 1%, but 1/4 of 1%. Well, then the money market started to say, hey, we'll give you 5%, 6%. They're like, okay. And that's what drove the breaking of a lot of banks that you heard about over the last 12 months. A lot of money shifted out of there and moved up to this 5% or 6% return. But these exchange traded funds are going to have absurd returns through the year, 50%, 100%. Now it's going to get crazy. If Bitcoin goes from 70,000 to 210,000, that will be a 200% return on people's money. Now, when that kind of mania, frenzy gets into the stock market and mom and pop and their wealth managers, and you're able to trade that on your 401k, almost all the money disappears out of our banking system and goes into that on Wall Street. Like you can see, that's clearly the play there. And the whole set of videos that I did 2 videos on that, it was asking the question, all right, well, how quickly will this happen? And how much money will come out of the banking system? And at what point does it cause a full collapse, of full contagion across, where they do banking holidays across the entire United States? Because so much money has come out so quickly. And then also at the same time, the mutual funds, the money would be drawn out of there, which we've already seen this last 2 weeks. The drawdown has been stupendous. So the money moved from the banks for 1/4% into the mutual funds, like trillions, and those trillions are now moving out into the exchange traded funds. So that kind of sets the framework for it here. There's going to be trillions of dollars pulled out of our banking system that move into the stock market. And how will that leave the rest of our banking system? Well, again, point the blame at the greedy human that they caused the collapse. And that's where we would sit with that. But we just see this article come out yesterday here off Zero Hedge. Bitcoin has 6 months until ETF liquidity crisis. Now, in English, it says we have 6 months until there's not enough Bitcoin to supply for Wall Street, is what that means translated. So what does that mean for the rest of us? Well, they say there's going to be a sell-side liquidity crisis. Like me or Ransom or anybody out there, if you have a Bitcoin and you don't want to sell it, there's going to be a bank that will pay anything to get that. Because when they have it, they're going to be able to leverage that and get more people in on their exchange traded fund product. But they have to have what they call the underlier, which is the physical thing, the physical product. Now, before it might have been gold. You have to have this many kilos of gold before you can offer a gold exchange traded fund. There has to be something physical behind it. And I know there's no physical Bitcoin, but they have to have those Bitcoin in a cold wallet in storage somewhere. So if anybody's going to do an audit, see, this is the easiest thing to audit ever because the blockchain is a public ledger. Like you either know that the exchange traded funds have it or they don't have it. Because America hasn't audited our gold supply since what, the 1960s sometime, or 1970s, excuse me. Like we really don't even know. They say there's 8,000 tons, but it hasn't been audited even once since that time. So do we really know there's 8,000 tons of gold in American reserves or not? We don't know. But for sure with Bitcoin or any cryptocurrency, it's on the blockchain. You can trace it. So you know JP Morgan's Bitcoin exchange traded fund has this many, absolutely, because you just follow chain analysis and boom, you see where it moves along the stream of information flow and it's public. Very hard to mask that. And they also want it on the chain to show that it's there, to draw you in, because more Bitcoin in a fund is more stability. All right. But we're going to run into this wall in about 6 months here. And who was that on-chain analysis guy here? Crypto Quant. His name is Ki Young Ju. He's a CEO. They do on-chain analysis and they kind of follow crypto around and they see where it moves, where it's flowing. And they call it, what kind of wallet is that? Oh, an acquisition wallet. All they do is buy and they never sell. So most people that have crypto, they're buying it and selling it a lot of times. But acquisition wallets it's 100% buy and they're just holding it. So those are the new players coming in to start their exchange traded fund. And this one here, this is the JP Morgan exchange traded fund, was the most successful ETF launch in history. Got $30 billion in just a few months. Gold comes in a distant second at $6 billion. So the amount of money coming in is just unbelievable, just unreal. So far, these guys have gobbled up 1 million Bitcoin. But you might think that's a lot. And it is a lot because there's only 21 million in total circulation. So the amount of Bitcoin currently that's being pulled into this exchange traded Wall Street fund is 30,000 Bitcoin a week are getting taken off exchanges, are getting pulled into these wallets that are just hoarding basically Bitcoin. And I'm wondering in the future if the government's going to pass a law and say you can't hoard your Bitcoin, you have to sell your Bitcoin or else we're going to make it illegal. And then these guys will gobble all up and they'll still have their exchange traded funds. See, whatever legislation comes in to stop this is going to be focused at you and me. I mean, I don't even have any crypto and I dropped that thing over. I got, I just kind of, it was ridiculous last time. I didn't even touch it with a 10-foot pole anymore, that thing fell off the boat when I was going across the lake one time. And you would never, it was so dangerous to even, hold it or trade it back in 2017 and thing. Sheesh. Oh, yeah. I'm not even, don't want to touch that again. But at this rate, we'll see the sell side liquidity crisis in 6 months. So if they're pulling 30,000 Bitcoin a week, okay, do the math on that. So 6 times 4 is 24. They're trying to pull in another 1 million Bitcoin off the exchanges. There's just not that much to go around. This is when they'll hit the tipping point here, 1.4 million Bitcoin, and then it is, according to chain analysis, the end of the road for the consolidators. Because at that point, people who have the Bitcoin are like, shoot, I want to hold it because I know the banks will give me a arbitrage or they'll give me an incentive to sell it. They're going to give me 20% more than the market price to sell it. So knowing this information, the targets for most of this Bitcoin in the run-up, not financial advice, but just based on past patterns, was going to be around 210 to 250,000. Okay. And then it was going to pull back and do its 40% pullback. And at the ultimate lows, it was going to be around 60,000 until it comes into the next halving in 2028. And they were predicting well over $1 million for that. So think about that. Banks just looking in the future going, gee, if we buy all these 30 million Bitcoin, 20,000 Bitcoin tranches or, segments of it, 20,000 Bitcoin come on and they'll buy it all in one lump sum. That's called a tranche. If we just sit and hold on this for 4 years, it's a good investment because it's going to go from 60,000 to 1.2 million. We'll get a 20x return on it just by holding it. Like banks on a 5-year hold, they're going to, sheesh, 20x return in 5 years. Sheesh, let me scratch my head. And they can control it, and they can create scarcity, and they can drive the price. My whole thing is like, when are they going to decide all sell it at the same time because of some government interaction and crash the price down to nearly zero? Because what goes in must come out. what goes up must come down. And somebody's going to get played on this. So in the next few years here, at least in this run up, it's going to be buy, 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 buy. And the price is going to run so much higher than people think. According to this on-chain analysis here, and I didn't know what this is one of the deepest articles to read about what's about to happen with our money supply. Gold went to all-time highs. Bitcoin went to all-time highs in the exact same day. So something people aren't believing our money is worth anything any longer. Also, people are swinging money over into something safer like gold. And now, because exchange-traded funds, now on Wall Street, that's considered safe. So people are going to move all these trillions of dollars over there. So 1.4 million Bitcoin to go before all the wallet addresses that haven't moved to Bitcoin in more than a year will still stay what they call stagnant. But then the others out there might say, well, we'll sell it to you for double price. And then this is where it gets on the order book, where you might see some unusual things going on where, hell, it would not surprise me if I saw JP Morgan put out a general call to the public to say, we will do a smart contract with you and give you double the price of the market value for your Bitcoin. Just give it to us. And we will give you double the market price for it, or 25% over market. It would not surprise me in the least to see banks doing this off-chain on smart contracts to get any types of Bitcoin delivered to their wallet addresses. Now, luckily with the smart contract, it's immutable. It can't be overwritten. So once the parameters are in there, like the address from one party to another, once that happens, then it should be able to click the button and you should get your paid. And I don't think they would scam anybody in the beginning because they really, 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 really need to get this Bitcoin. But what happens, let's say, in 2027, when all these banks have consolidated, say, 5 to 10 million Bitcoin, half of all the Bitcoin on the planet is consolidated in Wall Street on the exchange-traded funds. At that point, I could see where the U.S. government might say something, and then all of a sudden, all these banks dump it all out there and crash the price. And anybody who was holding it that was thinking they were going to the Bitcoin Citadel, which Ransom you referenced earlier, man, they're going to set aside these city areas that are outside of the chaos of the outside. It would be like a protected city wall, and who knows if it's even on our planet. I remember that it wasn't Elysium. Was it Elysium? Where they had up on the moon, or they had some, satellite area where people with their multi-billion-dollar mansions lived up in the rotating platforms where there were no outsiders, for a better term. But, that supposedly Bitcoin time traveler kept talking about these Bitcoin citadels where a tenth of a Bitcoin would allow you to live in there for the rest of your life with every need and want met. So that would make sense. If the Bitcoin price ultimately went above 10,000 or $10 million dollars for a single Bitcoin, that would make sense. And I don't know, man, the money system's about, the money changers are about to have their things flipped. A lot of people will, be rah, rah, hey, hey, I'm glad the whole banking system collapsed. But it's under the guise of smoke and mirror that it just moved. It didn't collapse. It moved. And that's the whole thing then. What happens when this money moves, the banking system collapses, and then all these capital controls are in on top, and everybody just got played. And that is kind of where I'm going with Mike Adams with the talk tomorrow. So anyway, Ransom, I don't know if that made sense or if it's kind of off mark there, or what do you think about that?
No, I think that's legit. They might even have those commercials like they used to have to buy your gift cards. I don't know if you remember that, but when the gift cards really came out on television, they would have I think it was about 5 years kind of after they were really popular, there'd be these commercials where they'd say, here, all of those gift cards, if you send them to us, we'll give you like pennies, almost penny for penny on there. But what they were doing is they knew that the amounts on there couldn't be used anywhere. Like people would leave a little bit of change on those things, and then they would buy up all your old gift cards. And it sounds like almost what they'll do with the Bitcoin and stuff. Hey, we'll give you these dollar bills if you give us all of that, stuff you're not using, all this electronic money, and we'll give you dollars on it right before the dollar kind of collapses. And think about this. What are these super smart cities? Where are they going? Did you ever notice that they're out in remote deserts and in the jungles is where they're planning on building these smart citadels, and they want you to think about the stock, the how do you put that? Buying stock in it, kind of. So if you're rich enough, you would help put in money there, and then when you get there, they have these little city state is basically what it is, with their own rules. They own everything. They own the street. So all of these ideas of the previous civilization wouldn't apply there. And not to mention, it seems like they kind of just set those up. Are those the safe zones? They're all going to go wait everybody out when things collapse, and that's why they're so far from the northern hemisphere's Western world, where they're out in the middle of jungles and in deserts like Dubai, or the ones that they were planning up here that was far out away from Nevada desert, where people can't travel to it. And if they get there, they're not going to be able to get in unless they got the right digital currency to get into the thing. And there'll be these little centers where they have stockpiled supplies. I could totally see that happening. But back down kind of in the real trenches of stuff, everybody's noticing that their grocery prices are skyrocketing. Everybody notices that there's a new influx of millions of people. Everybody notices that we're seemingly going to war. And, we've talked about this scenario, and there's a big argument going on the internet where people are arguing about, could we survive a nuclear war? And I'm actually opposite than most of the people that think like me. I actually think we can. And I think that they've tested that and proved that over the last 70 years. They've popped them off all over the place. And we've talked about this before, like 2,000 plus that are known to the public in the ocean, on the land, in the atmosphere. And I would bet that they've done tests probably on the moon and other places that we don't even know about, just to see how they could, use space weapons and other things. And by the way, while you were talking, I've been showing an article that's about the UK getting their new laser particle weapon that everybody's still in the stages of denial to think that planes, trains, and automobiles and satellites can beam down a particle beam and melt an engine block. I saw a documentary the other day that they were talking about in the late 90s, they could use it to melt an engine block on somebody that they were chasing that they didn't want to go nowhere, light their tires on fire. And people are still debating today whether or not it's possible. Now, I'm not saying anybody's beaming lasers down from space starting fires. I'm saying it's completely plausible. And not only that, the technology is being rolled out, just like I said it would for the past 5 years, onto the battlefield. And now countries are buying them up. So we're talking about particle weapons that will zap down drones, airplanes, whatever you want. It can also, it can also be used to eradicate invasive species. Like plants and animals of different kinds, maybe even bipedal animals that don't belong in a certain area that's off limits because it's either a owned corporate agricultural zone that belongs to one of these smart citadels, or it's a wildlife reserve set apart only for nature, just like on the Georgia Guidestones. If people can't see that that's what is being planned and implemented right now, I don't know what to tell them. I mean, because the writing is definitely on the wall. All of the stages are set up, and the last little shoe to drop is the mass die-off of populace. And we know that's coming, not only from the infertility, sterilization, like more and more things are being caught or admitted to or introduced into the public that they indeed have chemicals that didn't do the customer correctly. We'll just put it that way. Everything from feminine hygiene products to the cereal that you feed your children. Gender bending compounds, all kinds of stuff are in there. They're now admitting it like it's no big deal, just like Monsanto basically admitted to the public that, that one gardener guy got sick, we'll pay him, but let's all forget about it and move on now. Unfortunately, that stuff is saturated everywhere. And on top of that, they have plasticides, forever chemicals, and all these things. It seems like these were set up to have a conjunction effect all at the same time. And that's what we're seeing right now. But don't worry about it. They have all of the technology to start without you, to restart. So there may be a generation in the not too distant future that just wakes up to a new type of people. Not unlike when Neanderthal man probably first saw Homo sapiens invade their territory. Just one morning you wake up, there's a new kind of people there, and you're the survivor of the last era of things, the last layer of time. And now there's a new kind of person there. That person will be a transhuman person that will probably be under the age of 20, that has a complete set of morals, objectives, and aspirations completely programmed into them. They will have no empathy for you because you'll just be an invasive species that is in an unauthorized area. Like I said, one of these agricultural zones, or maybe you're trying to get water, or maybe you just wandered into a wildlife preserve that was set apart not for human beings.
Yeah, and who determines the no-go zone? Because we've seen all the maps before, we talk about that. But at what point does it stop then? At what point do they have enough free land, rewilded land? I mean, the population, you see the Georgia Guidestone's 500 million. I mean, but what happens after the 500 million? Is it allowed to come back up to 8 billion? Do they, kind of tweak it because, we need another 200,000, or we need another, 500,000 people because this service area here is not functioning properly anymore. We actually need more people than we thought there because AI gamed it out, or AI is producing its own autonomous, what you could call robots. I've seen some amazing things here. I was over in Taiwan just last week, and we went to this hotel to have some coffee in the afternoon, and they had a robot that was walking around. Excuse me. But somebody had to accompany the robot. So we had a human accompanying the robot, or the robot was having a human accompany it. But I found it very strange. I thought the robots would just run around and do their own thing. They were delivering and picking up different trays of foods and coffees and things. But I found it so unusual that a human had to walk next to the robot to tell people, all right, get out of the way, the robot's coming. And it was very clunky, kind of all one piece, and at the bottom there was no legs, or it was like on rollers and things. It was like, they actually looked like tank tracks made of rubber, like gripped rubber. This thing could spin on a dime and do all kind of stuff. But the absurdity of having a human accompany a robot to tell everybody to get out of the way of the robot when the robot was coming was just like an eye-opener for me anyway. I hadn't anticipated to see such a thing. And then there was another one when we went into a bank. I was just standing at the door, and it asked you some questions, and it spoke English and it spoke Chinese, and it did both. And then then it would tell you which line to go to, and it would print or give you a ticket to go wait in line, because you had to, usually when you're there, you got to get a ticket to wait. It's not like we just stand in line and you're the next one. You get a ticket. So if you're number 475, you get a ticket, and then there's numbers over the counter. So maybe they're like 462. You're this point in line, and then you can go do something else and then come back. Well, this robot was the same thing. It was just there to just give you a ticket after you talk to it. I mean, a door greeter could have done the same thing, sort of. I'm not sure, though. It's just quite weird the way that the robots are integrating into human society at the clunkiest version possible, almost like childlike clunkiness, but needing to be accompanied by a human companion to let all the other humans know that there's a robot coming through. But in the future, I don't know if it'll be like that. Because the stories of old, when the Anunnaki would walk down the street, people would drop to their knees so terrified and like squeak into corners and bury their eyes and like try not to even make contact with this thing, that it didn't need anybody to accompany it. The fear of it of itself was enough to make people tremble. And the streets just emptied out like you would turn on a light and cockroaches would split and just get out of the way. Because apparently these Anunnaki were so angry and so violent and just so aggressive that, toward human, the way you would look at a gnat is the way they would look at humans. And like, walking down the street, if you got in their way or eye contact, they would just instantly, you're gone. So people would literally run for their lives and like bury their heads and, not even just, I'm a rock in the corner. I'm not here. That kind of terror. So imagine on the robotic level of something like that too, but we're so far away from that, but still you got to accompany the robot, I'm looking at these things, if this duality that we have of how many humans do we really need on the planet anymore compared to their anticipation of automation and how many humans we might need anymore. But then the reality on the ground of how many humans we might really need because the calculations are off, because it was only a computer simulation and the real world does other things than what you expect or anticipate. Speaking of which, Ransom, let's do a full circle and I'll take you back to those images again that we were looking at in the beginning of the hour there. If we go to if you could help me pull up the different soil layerings there of the destruction phases of. So when we come back, if you want to put that on screen again, that bottom layer with the largest of rocks is super discernible that it's its own cataclysmic layer. But what's interesting for me, if you go up the layering there, you get up near the top in the late 16, early 1700s, there's another layer of very large rocks again. So I'm looking at that going, it wasn't quite the sterile layer. But if you're looking in terms of up and down the column of where the next set of largest debris and inflow is, you're talking in the 1670s right there, 1650s, which, boom, is right in the middle of the Maunder minimum. So for me, it does seem that even looking, the earth is telling us that something is here. So would it not make sense if those with the hidden knowledge understand the cycles, they understand the intensity of the cycle, would it not almost be a psychological operation to put up the Georgia Guidestones to say that there'd be 500 million people, when in reality they just knew the cycle was coming back and the earth would take its carrying capacity down to around 500 million people? And they were just overriding the natural cycle, giving you advanced warning of some other type of inbound cycle cataclysm here is going to take the population down. We've already mapped it out. We know when it's going to occur. We need to change the society greatly because we need to get ready. And I'm talking on the government. So we need to get ready. We need to get all these resources so we, as the governments, can survive and the elite can survive. And we get, like you talked about, these citadel places where there's stockpiles of supplies and everything. But look what's happening around the world. It's almost as if this is happening and the excuses are being given and these distractions are in place for you of any opposition in thought. If you disagree with what's going on, and really what's going on is a resupply plan to the elite and governments to keep this continuity of government going on. Raising prices, things disappearing, culture falling apart. But if you start to criticize any of it, and what I think it's directly going to be going to is, so far they've kind of morphed society and you can't criticize this, you can't criticize that, into when systems break down totally, you're not going to be able to criticize those that are running the systems because, and I'm not talking government, I'm talking about places like Boeing and places like DHL and different rail lines that are operating across the United States and Canada and the world in general, Eurostar. You can't criticize that because they crashed, their tunnel flooded because this idiot left it open, right? You're not even going to be able to criticize the downfall of the supply chain because of those that were put in positions of higher, just stuck there because they had to be stuck there because of certain percentages. You're not going to be able to criticize that because that will then fall into this category of, and you fill in your adjective there of whatever term of service that might break. You can already see it. They're plain as day. Everything's about to go haywire. And you're not going to be able to blame anything because they're of this type of position placed there just because they had to have that position filled. You know what I mean? I'm trying to talk around it, but we can see where it goes. You're not going to be able to criticize that. So Ransom, wind us out here, man. I got to get another coffee. Please help while I pour my coffee.
Well, obviously, we have to go to those simple solutions. if you're planning on being the people on the outside of that wall, outside of that citadel, you're going to have your own resources. You're going to have your own community. And, I don't know. I think that's exactly what they're planning, because I think that they have to have a second course of things going on as a fail-safe. I don't think that they would ever, eradicate everybody and start from scratch. They would leave populations everywhere, but for all intents and purposes, they're trying to remove people back to the Stone Age, all the way to eating bugs, snakes, and other things, instead of living our natural outcome that we've reached as a Homo sapien, where we've developed a domestication of animals, consuming meat, protein to enlarge our brain and to power our brain, and also to have civilization where we have grains and things like that to fall back on in case of catastrophe. And that's exactly what every nation on earth seems to be doing, the opposite plan of that, which means that they want a major collapse. And if you don't see that that's what's going on, I don't think that you can be helped. But most of the people listening to this program can see it happening in real time as we describe it.
So that means you're on your own for your preparations. So prep it nice, prep it long, and get ready to implement it. Until next week, David DuByne right here with Ransom Godwin signing off. Hope you have a productive week. Talk to you next time. For now.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio.
Just under 1,500 years ago, something terrifying happened to the world's climate, something nobody could understand. The sun began to go dark. Rain the color of blood poured from the skies. Clouds of fine dust enveloped the earth. Winter gripped the land for 2 years. Then came drought, famine, plague, and death. Whole cities were wiped out. Civilizations crumbled, and nobody knew what had happened. It was a catastrophe that affected millions and millions of people all around the world. But what was it? A catastrophic climatic event buried in the heart of the Dark Ages. This mid-6th century catastrophe was the most important date in the history of the past 2,000 years. This event created the world we live in today. Something far removed from the minds of everyday peoples of our modern times, unbeknownst to most, the catastrophe could at any time happen again. The volcanic winter was caused by at least 3 simultaneous eruptions of uncertain origin, with several possible locations proposed in various continents. There is even evidence of an extraterrestrial factor. A possible origin for this object could be the Taurid meteor stream. This stream is the result of the fragmentation of a much larger comet some 20,000 years ago. The Earth passes through the Taurid stream in November and June each year, resulting in regular meteor showers normally consisting of microscopic dust particles. A fragmentation of the stream is thought to have occurred around 500. It is possible that a fragment could then have collided with the Earth as it passed through the beta portion of the stream early in 536, causing the atmospheric dust veil event. The relevance is crop failures for several years in a row. While the dust veil was present, it may have caused widespread starvation, leading to an increased susceptibility to disease among the remaining population. Small comets had previously been thought to be less hazardous than small asteroids, but estimates show that a small comet fragment can have a global effect. In early AD 536, or possibly even late 535, an eruption or eruptions ejected massive amounts of sulfate aerosols into the atmosphere. The solar radiation reaching the Earth's surface reduced dramatically, and this rapidly cooled the atmosphere. Despite what the global warming nuts say, the sun seems to be the main driver of temperature and climate. The main historical aspect of the period around 536 may also be the most significant, especially to those descendants of the survivors. Who would be us today? This period coincides with a mass population decrease in Europe, in the Americas, the Middle East, and in Asia. In Europe, this is commonly known as the Justinian period, named after the Justinian plague, and is believed to be the first appearance of the Black Death in Europe. Meanwhile, in the Mayan Empire, things were looking bad. Researchers have realized that there is a 100-year gap in the civilization's productivity starting in 540, suggesting a dark age. The civilization experienced mass crop failure, which led to disease, starvation, and likely internal strife. People evacuated cities in and around present-day El Salvador. Cities that were left behind experienced a dark age, as evidenced by a gap in written records and a sudden decrease in construction in Maya city centers during the 6th century. In China, 536 was no better. Frost and snow in July and August that killed the seedling crop, causing a major famine the following autumn. Weather was so severe that 70 to 80% of the people starved to death. Procopius. The sun gave forth its light without brightness, like the moon, during this whole year, and it seemed exceedingly like the sun in eclipse. The sun was dark, and its darkness lasted for 18 months. Each day it shone for about 4 hours, and still this light was only a feeble shadow. Michael the Syrian. If such an event happened today, and crops failed over a significant part of the globe for several consecutive years, then once again a large percentage of the world's population would face starvation. Thankfully, unlike the peoples of the worst year to be alive, we don't have to worry about not having food to last. We have my Patriot supply. And right now, you can save $200 on a 3-month food kit with Adapt 2030. Adapt and stay